The Pod News Weekly Review is now available in video. Only joking.
The last word in podcasting news. This is the Pod News Weekly Review with James Cridland and Sam Sethi.
I'm James Cridland, the editor of Pod News.
And I'm Sam Sethi, the CEO of True Fans.
Our philosophy at Supercast has always been that we succeed when our creators succeed. And a lot of the creators that we worked with trusted us well before we deserved it.
Jason Suhoy on Supercast's acquisition by Red Seat Ventures. Plus,
if this pivot to video sloughs off all those really mediocre, ordinary, not very riveting talk things, they're welcome to video for that, as far as I'm concerned. It might do us all a favour.
Siobhan McHugh on why video podcasting is different to audio, plus more on Apple Podcasts video too. This podcast is sponsored by Buzzsprout, with the tools, support and community to ensure you keep podcasting. Start podcasting, keep podcasting with Buzzsprout.com.
From your daily newsletter, the Pod News Weekly Review.
James. So, last week was a long show, I'd say.
Was it?
I think people are still listening to the end of the last show this week already.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah. But I think it's time to go a little deeper. Let's go to the core of Apple's video announcement, I think. You've got more details. Tell me more about it.
Yeah, so we covered a bunch more details on Monday about the tech side of how Apple Podcasts is going to do video. There's quite a lot of quite detailed stuff in there, so probably not necessarily stuff that we need to go into. It's quite difficult because there is an NDA. And that means that there are some companies out there who have the details, but they're not necessarily able to confirm what I can see. They kind of know, but they can't quite say. So it's been quite difficult. I'm not sure that this has been particularly helpful for anyone. But yes, so a multivariant playlist. Oh, yes. Which I think the most important thing for anybody to know about this, because obviously if you're a podcast hosting company and you're a partner, then you'll get all of this detail anyway. The most important thing is that the audio for all of this stuff comes in a separate track, a separate rendition of HLS. And actually, if you fiddle around with the Apple Podcasts player, you can start playing and it plays the audio absolutely fine. And it's still sort of catching up on the video and trying to work out where the video is. But the audio plays absolutely fine. So the audio is rock solid. No matter what's happening to your bitrate in terms of the video, the audio is rock solid. And that's a really nice thing to end up seeing. But what that does mean, of course, is that when you press the turn video off button, you will still get the same audio track. You won't be able to, so far as I'm aware, you won't be able to offer a different audio mix than the one in the video. So that's one sort of really important part of this. And it does mean that, you know, we are going to move into a world where if you are using video in your podcasts, then the only audio that people will get is the soundtrack of your video. So you better make sure that that sounds really good.
So obviously, I am under NDA, but I don't understand, before we get into some more detail, why Apple has precluded people from talking about it, because clearly it's going to get into the public domain once people start using it and in anger. Maybe it's only because it's not going to be, released till the 3rd of March officially. Maybe that's the only reason I can think of.
I mean, I think it's because actually the only people who need to know the detail are the podcast hosting companies. So because the likes of you, the likes of me, because I self-host,
yes.
The likes of me, I will never know what the details are because I can't sign up. Apple aren't going to be interested in me signing up anyway. So I can't sign up to be a hosting company. So therefore I'll never see it, which to me seems a bit of a mistake because, look, at the end of the day, it's complicated enough. At least publishing the information is probably important to help us understand what is being asked for. And I think also, you know, the other side is that, it's not got long. I mean, you said March the 3rd. I don't know whether it is March the 3rd, but it's whenever the iOS 26.4 comes out, which is sometime either in March or in April, so I've been told. It certainly won't be as quick as March the 3rd.
No, I've probably got that date wrong. I knew it was a March date.
Yeah, so Ars Technica, I think, says either the end of March or the beginning of April. I was helping an advertiser for the Pod News website, with here's a line in case Apple drops video, here's a line that you might want to end up using. So, all of that is interesting. And I think also, we shouldn't forget it's a beta. Things change in betas before they actually launch. So, it could well be that Apple are quite sensibly turning around and saying, you know what, we're not going to be doing any public specifications quite yet, because actually the point of a beta is to test things out and see how things work. But, all fascinating stuff. So the audio being a separate track, that's why it works so well. That's why, that's why the whole thing works. Although that does mean that even the audio Apple will earn their money from when they turn on the cost per dynamic ad. So there's a thing there for us to bear in mind. The other thing that I did spot was ad skipping. Because the only thing that Apple have sent me is their main details, their main information about ads. And that is great, but it talks about this attribute called X restrict. And X restrict essentially allows you to make your ads unskippable so that people can't skip them. People can't even skip past them if you turn on the no jump feature. And I was thinking, okay, well, if that's in the spec, and the spec says that clients should respect this particular attribute, then that probably means that Apple Podcasts are going to stop you from skipping ads, and that's a bad thing. Anyway, I have heard from a number of sources, Sam, that Apple Podcasts will not be supporting the no skip thing. So if you put ads in there, people will still be able to skip through them as normal. So that's good news for listeners, and probably good news for podcasters as well, because frankly, that's what we're used to. So even though I was talking about the fact that it might be that you won't be able to skip ads, that's not going to be the case, and we will be able to skip ads in the future. So that's useful information to have there.
The fact that they've included X restrict does mean that they have that option, and that does worry me. But anyway, we'll see. Yeah,
they've got that option, but there again, they've got that option for things like Netflix and for Amazon Prime, because they're using the same stuff. They're using the same HLS to deliver to Apple devices. And I think the exciting thing about this is a really battle-worn player. It works really well in terms of playing media. And so therefore we are now getting access to that really good player. And that should be really good news for all of us, that in the Apple Podcast app, we won't just be playing an MP3, which can fail in various different ways. We will be having something which works much, much better. So I think all of this is good. But it's there's a ton of information. It's very, very techy, very, very geeky. The thing that I like most is if you want to make a 3D version of your podcast or an immersive video version of your podcast so you can see all the way around you, for the nearly 500,000 people who've bought an Apple Vision Pro, then you can, because that's actually in the spec, and you can actually make something which is, imagine a 3D version of the Pod News Weekly Review.
No. Nobody needs that. No.
Nobody wants.
Imagine on a flight, suddenly you and I popping up in their headphones. No. Right. There was a couple of things that I did find interesting from what you wrote. One was a format that I hadn't seen for the audio, which is AAC-LC. I've seen, obviously, AAC. What's the LC mean?
Oh, well, this is a version of AAC which has been named after Captivate's Elsie Escobar.
Right.
No. AAC-LC. It's just the standard. It stands for low complexity, if you really care. But it's just the standard AAC. So you've got AAC-LC, which is basically normal AAC, and then you can have AAC-HE, which is good for low bit rates. There's also XAAC. which gets even more exciting. But for normal use, AAC, it's basically an AAC file.
One of the other things I noted was analysis from John Spurlock, friend of the show. He talks about Art19, one of the partners, got video encoded in 5 sizes, no 4K, but 1080p, 720, 480, 360, 240. Again, as a host, you're going to have to support multiple versions of the video based on bandwidth. But Acast is also supporting it, but weirdly, and I don't know what this means again, the Art19 is at 30 frames per second and Acast is using 23.976. My God.
Yes.
Why, James?
Well, I mean, I could bore you with the reason why 23.976 instead of 24. It's 1% less than 24 is 23.976, and it's all the Americans' fault. And it's to do with NTSC, which used to be the way that Americans did colour TV. We use PAL in the UK and in Australia, or we used PAL in the UK and in Australia. The French used CCAM, and the Americans used NTSC, which, of course, as you know, stands for never the same colour. That's what it. That's what it actually stood for. No, it didn't. But I'm sure that it stood for something a little bit more positive. But anyway, so yes, very historical reasons why in Europe you'll have videos of either 25 or 50 frames a second. Apple supports all of those, so all of that is good. So we're not having to fiddle around with different sizes, different frame rates, and everything else. Everything is supported in terms of that.
Now on the Pod News Weekly Review, Unreliable Trivia with Sam Sethi.
Here's a Trivial Pursuit question for you. Why is the marathon 26.2 miles?
Okay, I've got no idea why.
The Queen. So the first marathon was from Wembley Stadium to Windsor Castle. And if you know Windsor Castle, it's at the top of a hill. So the Queen would not come to the bottom of the hill, which would have been the mark for the 26-mile marker. So they had to run the extra 0.200 metres to get to the top of the hill where the Queen would meet them.
Wow. And when you say the Queen, which Queen?
QE2.
Because there's been quite a few of them.
Yeah, it's the QE2. Well, there hasn't really. I mean, QE1 and a little bit of Mary for a while. Not many queens.
I'm going to fact check you here. No, wrong. What? Queen Alexandra.
Really?
Queen Alexandra. It was the 1908 London Olympic Games.
I thought it was
26 miles from Windsor Castle to the entrance of the White City Stadium. But Queen Alexandra specifically asked that the marathon start in the lawn of Windsor Castle so that the young royals could watch it.
Okay. Wrong Queen.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, 26.2188 miles.
There you go.
That's 385 yards. There you go.
But everyone's so happy about that.
Live fact-checking. It's like Diary of a CEO, the show.
Nothing like it at all, yes.
And that's Unreliable Trivia with Sam Sethi.
One of the things that I've incorrectly, it seems, said is that people don't skip ads. Well, I still believe they do, but one of our friends of the show, Dan Meisner from Bumper, has said that based on his small sample of his clients, that 90% of their audience listen to the ad breaks. Is this correct, James?
Well, according to Dan Meisner, it is, yes. Well,
it's gospel then. It's godlike, really, isn't it?
Yes, it's a small sample in terms of clients, but it's a large sample in terms of total audience. I think it would be fair to say, that it is still quite a large sample. It is hundreds of thousands of human beings. And checking that, I actually went back to Dan and I said, okay, so you are saying that for most shows, 90% of their audience listen right through the ad breaks and they don't skip. And I said, how do you know that? Because typically quite a lot of these systems will count you as a viewer or as a listener if you're consuming 1 second in 15 seconds or whatever it is. And so therefore, how can you say that? And the answer is that actually the data that he has looked at is purely Spotify data, which is accurate down to the second. So you can actually see that people are properly listening all the way through. They're not just skipping, but skipping quickly enough that it doesn't actually count. So he didn't look at the Apple data. He just looked at the Spotify information and found that 90% listen all the way through, although he does say that the longer your ad break, the greater your ad avoidance and the lower your ad retention. And that's important to remember as well. There are lots of podcasts out there, mostly through iHeartMedia, that start with 3 or 4 ads in a row and then have ad breaks in the middle of them with 3 or 4 ads in a row. And that's bad. And people are beginning to learn how to skip through those. But certainly for most shows, apparently most people listen all the way through the ad breaks.
So in other related news to the Apple announcement about advertising, Martin Bojos says or suggests that revenue for podcasting will increase by 20% if you take advantage of Apple Podcast Video. I don't know how he's come up with 20%. It's a lovely number. But I assume that more people will jump on board. So yeah, there is a uplift, but I don't know if it'll be 20%.
Yes, I'm not sure about that 20% number, to be honest, but I think it's, it's certainly, you can certainly see that there is going to be more money that is opened up by all of this. And that's going to make life, easier and simpler. He is talking specifically about the UK in this case, because there are various things in the UK which actually changes things. But I think, he says it bodes well for an industry that's punched above its weight in audience, but is still struggling to finance itself properly, which you can certainly say about the majority of podcasts. And seeing, he says seeing an increase in revenue of up to 20%. He's basing that on premium video ads, the cost per thousand on those, versus premium audio ads. Although, as I would say, if the issue is that people are going to hear the same, whether or not they're watching the video or not, I think there's a question mark there.
Now, a friend of the show, John McDermott, has also suggested that at least a third of all podcasts won't be able to put video into Apple Podcasts. And he goes on to say, I do find myself continuing to struggle to make sense of this industry desire to pivot to video. Yes. I still think the top 10, 15% will move to video. I think the long tail won't. And I think, we will settle somewhere in at a number somewhere eventually where people are comfortable. It's more money for those people who do video, but it's also more work and more cost as well. Yeah. So we'll see.
Well, yes. And so John has come up with that. Actually, I think he's overestimating it. I think that actually only a fifth of podcasts will be able to get video into Apple Podcasts. If you look at the share that the 4 launch partners have right now, then it's about 20%. So that means that 4 out of 5 podcasts, even if they wanted to, wouldn't be able to put video into their shows. So that's kind of one thing. I mean, the other thing, that I think it's worthwhile pointing out is, there's been a number of different people saying this, but people turning around and saying the reason why podcasts are going onto YouTube isn't because of a switch to video. The reason why is that people want the effect of the algorithm and they want new people to see their shows. And that is why, they are switching over to YouTube so that they get all of that effect. Apple Podcasts doesn't offer that. Spotify doesn't offer that. So the reason why people are shifting over to YouTube is for, as Dave Jackson calls it, the algorithm. And that's exactly, that's a really interesting thing because, Apple Podcasts, yes, offers video, but it doesn't offer any of the comments. It doesn't offer any of the algorithm stuff more than it currently does. So I think that there's definitely a conversation there in terms of, well, why are we doing this anyway? I think that's one thing. And I did note, I think on Wednesday, I did note that, a bunch of launches of new shows that had just launched in video form. So from The Telegraph in the UK, Ukraine, the latest podcast, is now in video. It's available on YouTube, not available on Spotify in video form. Sports Cafe launched in Australia. It's available in YouTube on video. It's not available on Spotify in video form. Midlife Messy and Marvellous, new from a TV presenter in the UK. Again, it's in video on YouTube, but not on Spotify. HBO Max and TCM's Talking Pictures. It's in video on YouTube, but it's not on Spotify in video form. So I'm sitting there and going, it couldn't be easier to put video up on Spotify. It's just uploading an MP4. Anyone can do it, irrespective of where you're hosted. But you've got these big companies who have just gone, we can't be bothered with Spotify, we can't be bothered uploading the video on there, we'll just keep on doing audio there. I find that really fascinating, because what does that say about how people are going to support Apple Podcasts, where not only are they not getting it for free, they have to pay to be on the Apple Podcast platform if they want to do ads. And certainly they'll have to pay additional hosting fees. So I just find that really interesting. That, if companies aren't even bothering with Spotify video, why would they bother with Apple Podcast video? And that worries me slightly.
I'll go one stage further. I mean, the Podcast 2.0 community has singly failed to implement video support. I think only a couple of people have done it now. Fountain certainly have. I think Podhome have a little. No, Podhome have said they won't. So I think it's Fountain. I mean, maybe Blueberry. I can't think. Captivate certainly hasn't. RSS.com hasn't. So you don't really have a lot of choice. So you really are limiting the choice as well of where you can place your video. So yes, you're right. Oddly, you've observed that people aren't putting it onto Spotify. Will Apple be any more successful? But YouTube obviously going gangbusters, but there aren't many other options, right? So we are forcing people, if they want to go down the video route, irrelevant of the algorithm, that there's only a couple of places they can do it.
No, indeed.
Moving on then, James, our friends at Triton Digital have some data as well. What are they saying?
They are saying that podcasting is not video first. Only 7% of podcast consumers exclusively watch podcasts. 80% watch and listen, but only 7% only watch podcasts. So don't go running away with the idea that podcasts have to be in video. That's absolutely not the case. That's part of Triton Digital's 2025 podcast report, which is a free download. And and it's interesting that came out from Triton literally the same week as they are a launch partner of Apple Podcasts' new video service, because it's kind of well, there you go. So really interesting, and Triton's podcast reports are always very good because they have an awful lot of data. Both survey-based data, but also actual data from the podcast rankers that they run. So a fascinating company when it comes to all of this information.
Well, the good news, James, is we've got Sharon Taylor, the Chief Revenue Officer, on next week to tell us more about this, and also hopefully a little bit about what their relationship is with Apple and how they're going to implement it.
Excellent news.
Now, we talked last week about a company called Supercast, a very similar company to Patreon, Memberful, and all of these subscription-based services. We talked about how Red Seat Ventures, which is part of Fox, has acquired them. They didn't give any terms, but it looks like they're giving out a significant amount of money, $26 million to their top 10 podcasters. This is all about paid subscriptions, James. And I predicted that I thought paid subscriptions by the end of the year would be a bigger revenue than the ad industry. Now, I might be wrong, but that's where my prediction was.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see whether or not we can ever see those figures. But yes, Acast partnered with Supercast last April, and Supercast also used by, massive companies like the Huberman Lab, This American Life, and everything else. You ended up catching up with Jason Siu Hoy, who is the CEO, and you started by asking him, what is Supercast?
So Supercast is the preferred podcast subscription platform for some of the most well-monetized podcasts in the world. So in a nutshell, what we do is we've brought the idea of taking free listeners and moving them through to being paid premium subscribers in a way that is as natural as possible to the world that we know and love as podcasting. So we work with some of the biggest names in the space, the likes of Huberman Lab and This American Life. Also work with a number of independent creators as well as bigger podcast networks. And basically we work seamlessly with the open podcast ecosystem. So in 2 taps, somebody could add the premium version of the podcast. So that could include bonus episodes, for example. It could include the ability to get a premium newsletter. It could also include the ability to join, the community of your favorite podcast. And you can get a lot of that content into the podcast player of choice with a really simple 2-tap sign-up process.
Nice. Now, I think you generated over $26 million in revenue last year. Is that correct?
So it's actually $26 million just paid out to our top 10 creators on Supercast.
Just the top 10?
That's
wow,
right.
Okay.
And so we've narrowed in on just showing that component because that has grown very steadily over time. In the beginning, after our first year, it was something like 6 or 8 million paid to our top 10. So you can see just in and amongst a standardized cohort of our top 10 customers, that has grown as people have really got on board with podcast subscriptions.
So what was the embryo of the idea? Every entrepreneur has their eureka moment. When did you suddenly go, you know what, I think I need something called Supercast and I need to build it? Why?
So I think this was the intersection of a couple of different things. I myself, as an entrepreneur, my previous company was 99 Designs, where I was COO and I led the growth of that business, which is in the design space and as a design marketplace for a decade prior to starting Supercast. And it was a completely different business altogether. We helped designers, over 1.6 million of them all over the world, help money by connecting them to businesses that need logos or websites or book covers design. And I mentioned book covers specifically because Tim Ferriss was an early customer of 99 Designs. He needed a book cover design for his second book, The 4-Hour Body. And he ran a contest and got just an incredible array of choice from our design community. When he in turn started his podcast, he invited us to be a sponsor, and we of course jumped at the chance to be able to work with him again. And just the way he spoke to his audience about how he used 99 Designs and how emphatic he was about this being a new way to get design created over the internet just turned out to be the strongest acquisition channel for 99 Designs for many, many years to come. The connection that Tim has with his audience and being able to recommend products and services like 99 Designs really opened my eyes to the intimacy of podcasting and just the strength of the medium that gets formed between a host and their listeners. So when I got connected to Andrew Wilkinson, my co-founder for Supercast up in Canada, and this is going back to 2019, he had just started working with Sam Harris. And one of the projects that he worked on with Sam Harris was taking his existing audience and helping him build a bespoke premium subscription platform. Essentially, this was the genesis for Supercast, working with one prominent creator who at the time had his paying subscription base on Patreon. And Patreon, of course, had been around for many years prior to that, but they were a horizontal kind of solution. They're a solution not only for podcasters, but for writers, for illustrators, for video makers. They weren't tailor-made to this idea of getting people who were listening to your podcast on a free basis through to listening to the premium version also in your podcast player of choice. So as a result, Sam just felt it was clunky, it was a lot of steps, it wasn't seamless, and he could be building both a more intimate experience, but then a bigger business, a higher converting business, if there were a tailor-made tool for that. And so we built out the first version of Supercast, the Genesis version of Supercast for Sam. His business exploded. His premium audience felt much more engaged as a result. And really that was the light bulb moment for us to say, okay, well, he's not the only podcaster. Who else could we be bringing this to be able to generate a significant revenue stream for them that is recurring and sustainable and works alongside whatever they're doing on the ad front.
One of the things I've been saying to James for a couple of years now is that the premium subscription marketplace is where podcasters are going to end up in, because advertising-led marketing is interruption to the actual content of the podcast. And that I always find jarring when I hear an advert. equally, we know a lot of people just fast forward through the advert anyway, whereas the subscription-based model gives you a stronger connection to your fan. They're making a real monetary payment to support you, but also it's then ad-free as well. Now, you must have seen Patreon doing very well. I think the numbers for Patreon have been $2 billion payout. You talked about a high number for yourselves at Supercast of 26 million. So there is a market there. And I think your other competitor, I would say, in the market would be Memberful, maybe Substack. I don't know what you consider your competitors. But with all of that going on, did you have a arrow of direction? Yes, I know this is going to work. Or were you sort of, do we try all these different things? Did you always just go straight for this premium marketplace and say, yeah, that's the features and functions we're going to add? Or did you try and dabble with advertising and other ways of monetizing, let's say, Sam Harris's platform?
We've been laser focused on subscription for the last 5 years. And really that grew out of our experience with Sam Harris and then rolling that into other creators like Found My Fitness, Rhonda Patrick in the health space. Huberman Lab followed on from that. Obviously, that's a relatively new podcast that they only started in 2020, but exploded onto the scene, and we were able to launch subscription with them shortly after. And then staying on that track, some of the creators that we work with today, This American Life, for example, we still have to pinch ourselves that I'm able to mention the caliber of these sorts of podcasts as people that we get to work with on a weekly basis and partner with. And I think part of that does come down to our focus. We don't see ourselves as the solution for somebody that's just starting out with their first 10, 20, 50 episodes. You can, of course, sign up on Supercast as a self-service creator if you have a show that's just starting out. But the Patreons of the world, for example, that is the long tail, as we refer to it, is their bread and butter. They invest a lot in marketing to have brand awareness for a much larger swath of customers. Whereas with our team, which is relatively smaller, and obviously we've raised a lot less money and so on prior to the acquisition, we've just stayed focused on super serving the podcasters that have already built up a significant audience and want to be able to work with a partner on a really close-knit basis to be able to create an offering for their audience that really fits that special relationship that they have. It's not the same size fits all, for each one of these creators. Yes, ad-free is a benefit, but then also, the common questions that come up are, what should I be offering in terms of bonus content? What works for other creators? Is it extended episodes? Is it one episode a week? Is it one episode a month? Should I do AMAs? AMAs are something that we kind of have built specific solutions around on Supercast so that you can give the audience the sense that they're able to drive the conversation in areas that are interesting to them and get their questions answered without it being a rod for the creator's back where they feel like everybody has a channel to them. And of course, when you're dealing with hundreds or thousands or even millions of listeners, that's just not a scalable solution.
And what is your revenue stream? I was just looking through it now. Patreon is a 8 to 10% from the subscription. I think Substack is a flat fee. What was the Supercast model?
Yeah, so Substack is just a 10% fee on whatever revenue you bring in. So we decided to go a different way, and we charge 59 cents per subscriber per month. So essentially, the amount that we take doesn't change as the creator decides to scale up their price. And so what you can do on Supercast is have multiple tiers. So you might have bronze, silver, and gold, for example, and bronze might start at $6 and gold could end up at $15, for example. And so our fee for the service that we provide doesn't change if you go up the tiers. And so if you have a $10 subscription price, for example, that the likes of Huberman Lab or This American Life have, that works out to 6% of the revenue that you're bringing in.
Now, given some of the changes occurring in podcasting with the advent of video, the introduction of live podcasting, how does Supercast see itself within those? I mean, going from just an audio-only model, have you embraced video? You talked about AMAs, so have you embraced live as well?
We have. So this is something that we've followed with a lot of interest, and it's particularly relevant to us because obviously the people that are prepared to pay for your audience are the people that are the most engaged within your audience. And what they're paying for is not only that additional content, but the access to you as a host and somebody that is playing an important part in their lives. So AMA, as you mentioned, is something that we did pretty much out of the gate with Supercast in establishing that two-way connection where premium listeners could not only hear an extra episode with AMA questions and the answers, but also ask their own questions. And so the way they did that was in the show notes of an episode, there would be links to go on Supercast website, submit your own questions, upvote other people's questions, and then, play the episode, on the website with, timestamps and so on, in addition to what you could get through the podcast player. Video, we leaned into pretty early on as well. So about 4 years ago, we started, kind of jumping in with video podcasters. The first version of that was an early iteration where we were basically embedding YouTube and Vimeo videos. But about 2 years ago, we flipped that into native video, knowing that video was just only going to get more and more important to creators. And so right now we have a video experience. It comes through basically the Supercast mobile-friendly web experience. And that's something that we're very much looking to invest further into.
Okay, this is quite prescient. So you've got the platform, you've got the revenue model, you've got the users. Is this when you suddenly found Red Seat Ventures? When did they first come and tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, do you fancy a chat?
So I've known Chris for a number of years now, just being in the industry for a while, he got introduced to me as somebody that I should know. And I was also curious about his background. He, in the radio days, also used to operate subscription business. So I know that he was a big believer in the model. Also just someone who's done something pretty amazing in terms of what he's able to build up in partnership with his creators. So about a year ago, we ended up starting to work with a creator from his portfolio. That creator has built up a stream of revenue over time that has just continued to snowball. And so after Chris's own acquisition by Red Seat by Tubi Media Group, a little over a year ago, I reached out just to really get a sense of what that meant for him, the direction that was now leading him into, the opportunities that had opened up for him. And at the end of that call, he suggested that we go and chat to Paul Cheeseborough, who is the CEO of Tubi Media Group. We lined up another call, and about 10 minutes into that, I think we were all kind of in strong alignment that there was a really strong strategic fit to explore here, which, fast forward a little bit, has obviously turned into our acquisition.
So now the acquisition's occurred. What does that mean for Supercast? Will you remain independent with your audience, or are you going to be now part of Fox, and are you going to be integrated directly into their platform? How's it all going to work? What's the path forward next?
So we will continue to run Supercast on an autonomous basis, exactly as it is today. So being creator first has got us to where we are today, like being able to go out to the likes of This American Life and the Huberman Labs and to say to them, you own your audience. We want to help you convert as many of those possible through to paying subscribers, but ultimately you're in charge of that revenue stream. It'll be your Stripe account, all built under your brand, was a really powerful way for us to approach the market and also build the trust that, we've been able to do, with the creators that we serve. So it was really important to us that none of that changes. The team is staying the same. I'm continuing to lead the business, and our philosophy for the way we serve creators, none of that is changing. But what does open up in terms of possibilities is being able to run faster at the things that we want to build. So obviously Red Seat Ventures, and with the backing of Tubi, gives us the ability to hire more engineers, for example, hire more creator growth resources, scale out our support team, and to be able to build out the product in a way that allows us to serve our creators better and also have them grow at even faster rates than they are currently.
One of the areas that people are looking at is obviously AI. Have you got any plans to integrate AI into Supercast?
So, like everybody, I think, in the world, we're following this with interest. There are certainly areas from a product point of view where assessing, like not only what can we do from an engagement front, but what also can we do from a workflow front. One of the most powerful things that this acquisition enables is us to be able to bring ad revenue, which Red Seat Ventures is world class at, and subscription revenue, which we're, Supercast is world class at, all under one roof. And that hasn't been done before. If you look out across the landscape of the creator economy and the podcast industry, typically you get players that can represent you on the ad side or the subscription side with the platforms, but they basically stick to their knitting. And as a result, the creator has to stitch together all of these solutions. If they want to sell ads, that's one partner. If they want to do subscription, that's Supercast or another player. If they want to do events, you have to work with another partner again, merchandise. You get the idea, email, the whole works is like, it's so fragmented. It's a wonder that creators have any time to actually get on and record content. And so your question was about AI, but I think the opportunity that we see is really to bring all of it under that roof and to streamline a lot of the workflows it takes for the creator to be able to reach their existing audience, reach new audience, and then to be able to convert that audience as high a rate as possible through to being listeners of ads, but then also, premium subscribers on a subscription basis as well. So AI is certainly going to come into the picture amongst all of those tenants, but I would say really we're starting with the vision of where we want to take things for creator-owned companies and media companies.
I've said to James on several occasions that back in the early 90s when the internet was first born, you would hear the term portal, MSN, AOL, Yahoo, Netscape, they're all portals. I'm a firm believer in what we are now seeing is democratized portals where brands and creators can build their brand around a portal, which is fundamentally audio, video, email, newsletters, merch, live events, all sorts of other things. And it's their portal and their branded portal. So I'm fully with you on the idea of one stop for the brand or for the creator where they can bring their audience to it. I use the term monetizing fandom as the way of describing it, but there's many ways of saying the same thing. We see you in London at the London Podcast Show, Jason.
I would love to get there. I actually haven't been to the podcast show yet, so I was actually looking at getting out there last night.
Join us. It's great, I have to say. I really recommend it. I think you'll gain a lot from it, but you'll also be able to give a lot to that audience as well. And last question, with whatever monies you've acquired, have you had one, I suppose, little pleasure, something that you've always wanted to buy or something that you've always wanted to do? Have you taken that one moment to go, this is what I've waited for. I'm going to go and do something with my money?
I honestly haven't given that an ounce of thought. Like everything in business, yes, there are these milestones that you get to, but ultimately we're all here kind of like building things, and the day after something like this is announced, there is now another list of things to do. So to give you an example, next week, we've got the Podcast Business Summit in Brooklyn, and then we'll be spending some time in person in New York with the Red Seat team on the exciting stuff. There's a whole lot of work that's involved in bringing two companies together, both from a diligence perspective, like getting something like this over the line. And really, this is getting to the exciting part, the combined vision of what we can be building together and how that impacts the team, expanding the roadmap, and so on. And so, to be honest, from a personal perspective, I'm sure that'll come. But for right now, these conversations are what I've been working hard to get to. So I've just been focused on that.
I think I've got one for you. Book those flights to London, bring your family, and have an extended holiday on the back of it. How about that?
Sounds good.
Jason, if anyone wants to find out more about Supercast, where do they go?
Supercast.com would be the first stop. They can obviously browse the site. There's the ability to book a demo there with our partnerships team, or if they want to, they can also reach out to me personally at jason@supercast.com.
Jason, once again, massive congratulations as a fellow entrepreneur, exiting, or in your case, getting that investment. It's super hard to get there. So massive hat tip to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And look, wouldn't be able to do it without an extremely talented team and then the trust of a lot of our creators. At the end of the day, our philosophy at Supercast has always been that we succeed when our creators succeed. And a lot of the creators that we worked with, trusted us with their audience relationships and their money well before we deserved it. So if there's anything I would like to close to, it's really gratitude for the creators that we've been able to work with. It's a pleasure to see them on the daily basis, our team and the creator economy that is working equally as hard to build everything around us.
I look forward to seeing you in London. Take care, Jason.
Thank you, Sam.
Jason, lovely man that he is. Very, very interesting story. I mean, they started in 2019 with this idea of a subscription-based platform way, way earlier than a lot of people, I think, took that on board.
Yeah.
And I loved the fact that I didn't know his background. So being the CEO of 99 Designs, clearly has run big companies and scaled them. So that was very good. But the secret sauce was obviously getting Sam Harris and Tim Ferriss onto the platform very, very early.
Yeah.
And that, of course, would have led to them getting Huberman and the rest of it. So, yeah, well done to them.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think one of their original investors was Tiny Capital, a little company based up in Vancouver. And Tiny Capital were also the company that grabbed Player FM for a while, I seem to remember. Hello, James from The Edit here. No, I meant Castro, of course. Castro, not Player FM.
And that's Unreliable Trivia with James Cridland.
Yes, all right. I remember Jason Suhoy, who managed to get in and see a talk that I was giving at Podcast Movement Evolutions, the very first one in 2019, and managed to get in and watch the talk. It turned out that, you know, if you're bootstrapping, you save your money where you can, and it turned out that he had managed to get past the door staff, even though he didn't actually have a paid ticket. So well done to Jason for doing that. Could probably tell that story now. So there we are. No, he's a good man. So I'm very pleased for his next chapter.
I'm sure he wasn't the first, and he won't be the last who does that either. Now, last week we talked about an online symposium called, well, I don't know what it's called. It's spelled Mi Casa, right?
Yes, I've got no idea how it's pronounced either.
Yes, it's an acronym, but it's Mi Casa Radio and Audio Studios Group. They did an online event, and one of the speakers was Siobhan McHugh, who I know, and she was talking about the so-called pivot to video and why stories can generate empathy, insight, emotion, and reverberations that endure long beyond the perspective of video podcasts. So I thought, why not reach out to her? I haven't spoken to her for about 4 or 5 years. And I started off by asking her, what was the event you were at and what was the presentation you gave?
So the event was a symposium organised by a group called MEXA, which is an acronym for a big media communications academic study group in the UK. And they were celebrating World Radio Day, actually. But they launched with my keynote, which was called, I think it's fairly self-explanatory, Viva the Narrative Podcast, the Case Against Video. And it was really my chance to both explore the endlessly discussed pivot to video of the last 2 or 3 years, but also to use it as an opportunity to pay tribute to the narrative podcast as a distinct form that will not be convertible to video, regardless of other aspects of this debate, and to sort of highlight the strengths of this art form and its value, and then to really think about the impact, what will happen if podcasting as a term that has become so familiar in the last 10 years, if that does become claimed more by video than by audio as it started out.
Before we get into a little bit more depth about what you said, can you just define for everybody what is a narrative podcast?
So a narrative podcast is usually a storytelling, serialized, long-form podcast format. So we have episodes and cliffhanger techniques, just as you would with your favorite streaming thing on Netflix or whatever. And I see it as a kind of usually a hybrid of art and journalism. So it doesn't have to be made by journalists. There are lovely podcasts made by people about their life story or whatever it might be. But usually journalists do it very well because it lets journalists off the leash. It allows them to really play in that space. They're not constrained by time. They have the capacity to communicate well, to use words well, but also, and this is key and new even for some journalists, to use sound to aid and abet the storytelling. And one of the key points that I made in my talk and that others have made is that the absence of pictures in a narrative audio podcast is not a negative. It's not a handicap. It doesn't mean we are less than something on Netflix. It means that we are other than, we are different from. And in fact, using sound only and not providing images is very liberating in many ways, both in terms of imaginative possibilities and also in terms of what you don't have to worry about. So I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, am I having a bad hair day? I've got to worry about what I look like. Whereas in front of a microphone, and more importantly, when I'm sitting down trying to get somebody to tell me their story, which might be nuanced, sensitive, difficult, even traumatic, I want to limit as much as possible the intrusiveness of my reaction with them and just focus on that personal connection. And audio does that so much better. So you get much richer core material to work with when you're telling a story, if you do it right with audio. And then you can play with this beautiful kind of what I call the choreography of sound, where you only have to hear a seagull squawk, and in your mind's eye, you're suddenly off by the Atlantic coast. For you, it might be remembering a summer holiday. For me, it might be sounding mournful, like the loneliness I felt walking on a beach one day or something like that. Whereas if you plonk an image of Brighton Beach, all you can see now is Brighton Beach, and we are limited in where we can go to in our imagination. So it constantly annoys me, actually, that people who spruik video always act from a place as if it's better than audio, as if we are somehow the orphan cousin of the media that are down the scale in terms of sophistication. We are not less sophisticated than people doing video or even people doing great films. We are just different.
Yeah, I mean, we still have radio, we still have TV. People listen to serialized programs on radio and they don't feel that has to be transferred to TV. They each, as you say, have their place. I love the fact that you describe the sound generates its own image within your own mind, which means that, you are the producer of your own, I guess, audience participation, really. This is how I'm interpreting the narrative. But do you feel that the pressure of video, which is what we're seeing now, I think it's more to do with, I'm not sure in the narrative space there is that pressure, but certainly within the interview style space, the two-head space, it feels that there is more pressure. We talk about parasocial relationships with the audience, right? The audience comes back, hopefully, as fans time and time again, listening to the hosts of their favourite podcasts. And people say video enhances that parasocial relationship because you get the nuance of facial gesture or gesticulation. But that, I think, is where video maybe have a benefit. But do you see any space where narrative would adopt a video as well? Or is that just a no-go?
Well, firstly, I do think that obviously a video podcast format will work well for a talking head type of show. So essentially chat television. And I can see the advantages for people who make that kind of show in that they will get more reach, in that they don't really have to make much of an adjustment. It will just translate. But at the same time, the limitations of that are that you're tethered to a screen. You can maybe be walking around a room and have it on in the background. And we know that people both watch and listen to those formats. But what does it really add? I was looking at Louis Theroux and he was interviewing Marina Abramovich, the great performance artist. And I've watched her installations at the Museum of Modern Art and stuff in the past. And to my surprise, it was so static. it was just Louis and Marina. She's a regal looking woman. She's remarkable. She's very poised. But I've seen still photographs of her, so I know what she looks like. And it didn't add anything for me. They didn't do any cutaways. They didn't go to her some kind of literally an installation where she's moving around or doing eye contact things with people in a museum. It was all just a set that was there. And yes, we can see expression, but we can hear expression in the voice too. And sometimes that's more potent because we're not distracted by thinking, oh, she shouldn't have worn that color, or it's a bit high for her complexion, or whatever it might be. You're actually able to focus more and absorb and engage with. And we actually have statistics that show that audio, people who are taking in content through audio retain it longer, and there's more cognition. And advertisers, of course, salivate about this. But so is there something that video can provide that's a plus? Well, yes, and some people are recognizing that. So I was interested to note that have you heard George's podcast, that fabulous duo? They are reshaping, reworking their past catalog for their YouTube platform to make it more video friendly, more visual friendly. And I think that's great because that will be a new artifact. That's a new thing altogether. And that's where I think people might need to go. Then instead of just doing a cheapskate dump of a video version that is really just somebody's set and two talking heads, and if they talk for 2 or 3 hours, they're not going to keep me listening, I can assure you. But if they do something a bit more inventive and creative, yes, of course it can work. Otherwise, I really do feel it's just a cheapskate version of a TV show. And I'm sure the TV execs are very happy with that idea because they don't have to provide unionized crew and hourly rates and minimum wages and all the rest of it that goes with a long-established TV industry. So, of course, there are things that work well on video. The Colbert Show, which is coming to an end soon, I can't see that working as well as a podcast because he uses visual gags. He's brilliant with his eyebrows, not to mention all the slides that come up and the TV imagery. But other well-established podcasts like The Rest is Politics, they are very lazy. All they do is throw up the odd little background slide of a comment on X or a screenshot of something. And we see Rory in a bedroom and in his hotel room, and we see Alistair at a desk with a mug of tea or something. But it's not really visual rich content, and I can't see that it adds much that you wouldn't get on audio. And in audio, you also have the absolute winner of portability. So you can be out walking the dog or driving, as I'm about to do. I have 90 minutes ahead of me, and I'll be listening to podcast content with absolute undivided attention because we also know that you can drive and listen at the same time. So in terms of, I'm losing a bit of your question, but I really think that they are different formats, and somehow the messaging about video has got caught up with the marketing, and it's all about style rather than substance. And this was brought home to me in a kind of a ridiculous way, where I remember seeing a thing on one of the social media of a podcaster with the big designated hefty mic and the headphones, and he was selling some kind of message. And it turned out afterwards that the mic wasn't attached to anything. He didn't have a podcast. He wasn't even in a studio. It was just the imagery, the cachet of being a podcaster that he was trying to harness. And I think that kind of sums up the hollowness at the heart of this pivot to video, if you like, that I'm more of a content person. And in a way, I'm happy because if this pivot to video sloughs off all those really mediocre, kind of ordinary, not very riveting sort of end of talk things where people are just hammering on about something that they are trying to get advertisers for in a very niche way, they're welcome to video for that, as far as I'm concerned. It might do us all a favour.
Yeah, I mean, you said it beautifully there, so I won't. You took all the aspects I was hoping. James succinctly says podcasting is something for the ears while the eyes are busy.
Perfect, yeah.
Now, moving on a little bit, let's find a little bit more about you. How did you get into podcasting, and you know, what was your entry into it? Did you just start as a podcaster before you moved into being, you know, a consultant, a critic, an author?
Well, I started out like many people in radio. So I was sold on audio from way back in my 20s. I used to work at Irish Public Radio, RTE. And I learned then what we all know, the magic of audio, the intimacy of audio, the authenticity, the theatre of the mind, and the connecting capacity, where you could have people weeping, sitting in the car. I remember looking across at the traffic lights and one of my programs was playing and this person was just standing there, just weeping. And I knew, because in those days, people were tuned to the public broadcaster. I knew they were listening to the voice I'd recorded. It's just a marvellous, evocative and affecting medium. So I was already in the audio camp, but what brought me into podcasting proper was a newspaper in Melbourne called The Age, which is rather big here. They do the Sydney Morning Herald. They had brilliant top-rate journalists who were desperate to make their version of Serial the year after Serial, like so many people. And so they brought me in as a consultant because they realized they had started making their own version and it sounded terrible. I actually, when I get my first listen to what they gave me of what would become a great podcast called Phoebe's Fall, I said, I'm sorry, this sounds like audio toilet paper. And what I meant by that was it was just one long linear screed that was absolutely undistinguished or differentiated. So there was no light and shade. They had no sense of pacing or texture. That comedians make good podcasters because they understand timing. Timing is the great strength of audio and of audio podcasting. And you can't just be too dense or people will resist it and their attention will wander. And sometimes you put in those pauses through music or something like that. Sometimes they're natural pauses, but they couldn't get this straight up because they were print people. And also they weren't writing for audio. They were writing in this more stiff, formal way, using things like they will see what will happen instead of saying they'll see what will happen, the way a conversational mode. And also they were doing things not hearing, they were talking over their interviewees and not letting them speak so that we had freedom to edit that voice separately. So there were all kinds of 101 for audio journalists, but even for these terrific storytelling journalists, audio was a surprise medium. And I remember one of them said to me, it sounds like a dog's breakfast. Why? What are we doing wrong? And I and a couple of others were able to give them the tips. And to be fair, they picked it up fairly quickly. And Richard Baker is now a force in Australian podcasting and has his own company. He quit the newspaper where he was a regular front page writer. So I suppose Phoebe's Fall, which launched in 2016 and went on to be mentioned in Parliament. It was about a young woman who tragically died. And the family asked us to investigate, was it an accident? Was it murder? Was it suicide? And it explores all of those personal storytelling aspects that audio podcasting does so well. Now, I know that's been hijacked into the ubiquitous true crime podcast genre. And again, I'd be happy to see some of those, the more salacious tabloid end of that, go into the video bracket and leave us with the thoughtful ones that really go to interesting places, that go into the psychology and the behavior of people and the ethics behind things. We know the classics there. But after Phoebe's Fall, I did 2 other podcasts with the Age team. I really enjoyed The Last Voyage of the Pong Su, which was where a cargo ship from North Korea, absolutely bizarrely, one morning tried to dump 150 kilos of heroin on an Australian surf beach, to the amazement of the locals. And we had lots of these dry, laconic locals talking about, right, I went down the beach and there's all these cops there and it's just fantastic. But we use that to go into the background of the North Korean regime and to try and understand what happened to those sailors on the ship, North Korean men, as much as what happened at the Australian end with the cops, who gave us this extraordinary 14 hours of surveillance tape they had of these drug mules waiting to get the deal. And there was this magic moment in the podcast where this poor guy, who was only there because he had a gambling debt and had to do this work, and he says to the older Crim, he says, do you think the cops are listening to us? And we hear his mate say, no, mate, only the FBI can do that. And then we cut to the Australian cop who's cackling away and saying, we had a good laugh when we heard them say that. Their goose was cooked. So audio could do things that really humanized the experiences behind the 3D storytelling, and personal storytelling and audio podcasts in that long form way are a marriage made in heaven. I will always believe that. But you have to know how to do it. There are skills involved in making a narrative podcast. And sadly, the executives on the top floor don't realize how important and difficult and rare these really highly skilled people are, because if you do it well, it sounds effortless. And so it's invisible. I've got a chapter, The Invisible Art of Audio Storytelling, which tries to unpack and deconstruct the architecture that goes into a narrative podcast, but that can only be seen if you do it wrong. And this is why those executives, and I've had my own brushes or encounters with these, are loath to fund narrative podcasts properly. And this is, I think, why the bubble burst for narrative podcasting to a degree last year, because they think that it just makes itself. They think it's only talk. How hard can that be? There's no film crew involved. Why do we have to pay X amount for? And the reason is because it takes time to listen endlessly through and through again and doctor the script and restructure it and make it so that it flows cohesively and compellingly, just as it would if you're looking at House of Cards or Breaking Bad or any of the great series that we all remember, which, yes, they're more complicated, they're in a different medium, but the principles are the same, really, in terms of drama and storytelling.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points I wanted to pick up on. First, you've observed that SAG-AFTRA is not being used a lot now, and Netflix is buying cheap podcasts, and they're doing that very well. The second part is this whole skill set about creating the narrative podcast. I think the challenge we've seen with companies like Inception Point AI, who just want to churn out thousands of podcasts for monetization through advertising. So within the narrative podcast genre, do you think the author is obviously very important, but do you think the voicing of it is very important, or can AI replace any of that element as well?
I don't think AI can replace the voice of a host who is central to a narrative podcast. No, because thankfully, in my view, AI cannot sound authentic. I've just listened to the Parkinson AI series, and it was spine chilling. Spine chilling. I heard a sportsman, I don't know these UK people as much as you would, but he confessed to some little tick he had. He liked eating in bed, and it was a naughty little thing that he liked to do. And instead of giving a little chuckle as you or I might have, or whatever, the AI Parky goes in this robotic way, relaxation is an important part of everybody's life. Now, he might have had the Yorkshire accent, but he did not sound like the real Michael Parkinson we knew and loved. And actually, it felt like a desecration of that man to have him repurposed in this way. And then he said, well, moving across to a different, this is the robot voice, moving across to a different topic, let's talk about your blah, blah. And even the guest said, whoa, that's a bit of a sharp turn, because it didn't have any normal narrative flow. It was a programmatic response, obviously. And yes, of course, AI is getting more sophisticated by the minute. And yes, it does have its place in terms of other useful things it can do. Obviously, transcripts, maybe mining material just to make it accessible to the actual host to be able to synthesize large amounts of data so that they can do a better interview or something. But in terms of providing that real parasocial relationship where we want this host to be our friend, no, those Penny, the finance woman that Inception AI has come up with, I listened to the cooking woman. No, we have a great woman in Australia who does a show called Tin Eats, and she tests everything on her dog. And she's real. We love her. The poor dog died of old age recently, and we all had a moment in honor of the lovely golden retriever she had. You cannot fake that. Thank God. You cannot fake feelings. And feelings is what comes through in audio. And actually, wearing an academic hat, I've written endlessly about that, the effective power of voice, because I kind of cross over into academia as well. But Inception AI, to me, is a hideous, it's a hideous concept. It's a desecration of all that we love about communication. I understand that podcasting is also a great medium for the transfer of knowledge in an intermittent, entertaining way. I personally like podcasts like Empire with William Dalrymple and Anita Anand. It's a great way of understanding world history, events, and all the rest of it while being entertained. And I do remember some part of what they tell me, and I learn things. But at the other end of that scale, there's this insatiable need to absorb knowledge. Is it because people are trying to better themselves for a career move or something? And again, I understand that in a poor country where you don't have access maybe to formal education, this can be life-changing. I'm not going to denigrate that. But somehow, to me, the idea that there's just this endless need to feed people stuff, data, information that they can get at 2.3 speed via these thousands of podcasts, where's the insight? Where's the human making sense of that happens in a normal kind of podcast communications mode? It's not there. And to me, it's like making us into slaves of podcasting and of marketers. And I don't like it. And I hope it goes belly up very fast.
Hear, hear. Now, I think one of my favourite authors is Yuri Noval Harari, who wrote 21st Rules for the 21st Century. I saw him with Stephen Fry on stage, and he said simply, in a world of AI, more human connection and more humanity is what we need. And I think what was very interesting with the Notebook LM characters, that they were putting out show after show, and then at some point, somebody pointed out to them that they weren't real. And these AI characters had a shock moment. What do you mean we're not real? And as Yuri Naval said, they had no backstory. They didn't raise kids. They didn't go to school. They didn't have friends. They didn't do... So you can fake it until you make it. And in this case, they couldn't fake it or make it, right? They literally came to a screeching halt in a realization that they were just computerized AI characters with no backstory. So I think, that's where I think you're right. Podcasting has to, in a world of excessive marketing and monetization, and in a world where, as you said, 2.3x data transfer of information, the humanity of podcasting probably is one of those things that humans, as we get, bombarded, will want to grapple towards more, not less.
Absolutely. The signature characteristics for me of podcasting, apart from the obvious and fated one of intimacy, is authenticity. And was it Groucho Marx who said, if you can fake sincerity, you've got it made? You can't. And every interview I've done, and I've done an awful lot in my lifetime, was based on empathy and finding empathy for the other person. And sometimes that comes from your backstory, and sometimes that comes from your ability to put yourself in their shoes, even in difficult circumstances when they might have done something that you're struggling to understand and certainly aren't able to condone, but you still want to know why, what made you do that. I cannot see that we can program any large learning model host to find that sort of aspect. And it was clear in those Parky tapes, the AI Parky series, which I understand was an experiment. It's a valid experiment, I think, because it does open up potential for use of archives in an interesting way. But you can do that in a better way. Division Street Revisited, which is up, I think, for an Ambies at the moment, is a lovely reworking of Studs Terkel, the Chicago oral historian. And they've dug into the tapes and they've refreshed them via new eyes and getting somebody today to comment on what was said back in the 60s. So there are ways around it. By all means, let AI do what it can do well, but no, it cannot replace our humanity. Thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness indeed. Now, look, if somebody wants to find out more about you, follow you, where would they go?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn is where I'm posting most. LinkedIn or Instagram. And also my talk for Mexo will be published in Radio Doc Review. Coming out in about a week or two, it'll be online. So you can just Google Radio Doc Review, which is a free website journal of criticism of audio stuff that I actually founded about 12 years ago.
Now, you've also written a book a little while back called The Power of Podcasting. So I'm going to ask, is it an audio book as well? Can I hear you tell me about the book, or do I have to just read the book?
I'm afraid you will have to read it. I would love to have done it as an audiobook, but because I refer to and analyze so many podcasts, the rights issues was a nightmare. However, I'm very chuffed to note it was mentioned on the Oprah Winfrey Network some time ago, last year. And even though it's a funny book to describe, there's a lot of history in there. There's a lot of storytelling by me because I can't help myself. I'm Irish. Everything's a story. But there's a lot of hard how-to advice on how to make narrative podcasts, what works and what doesn't as well. So hopefully you can find it on the usual.
Siobhan McHugh, it's lovely to see you again. Congratulations on everything you've achieved, and look forward to reading and hearing more about what you're doing in the coming years.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's been really lovely to talk to you as well after all this time.
Siobhan McHugh is a very, very clever person. She spoke at Podcast Day 24 in Sydney when I was running it a couple of years ago. Really, really good. And I totally agree where she's coming from in terms of what video gives you, which is whatever you're being told to visualize in your mind, and what audio can give you. And a really good example of that is when you're selling a holiday, for example, and you want to argue that what sort of holiday would you like, and your idea of a beach holiday and my idea of a beach holiday might be entirely different. But if we use the words correctly, then you see your ideal beach holiday and I see mine. I think I'm sure that we've all lost count of the amount of times that we've seen people who we've only heard for a number of years. PJ Vogt, for example, who does that great podcast called Search Engine. I've always had an image which isn't a great image of what PJ Vogt I thought looked like. Anyway, I saw a video of him a couple of weeks ago, and he's like a male model, and he's buff and everything else. Absolutely not what I thought that he looked like. So I think there's an awful lot to be said for that. And she's written an excellent book as well, which you should go out and buy.
Yes. Funny enough, Adam Curry, before he ever saw me on video, thought I was a blonde, blue-eyed English public school boy.
There you go. Well, he got one bit right.
Yeah, I know those blonde highlights.
Not that.
Chris Kelly wrote on LinkedIn, which I also thought was quite interesting in relation to this. He said, I can see words in my mind. He said people who use Descript to edit fundamentally are seeing the transcript-based editing as the culprit, because there's more information in the audio than just the words. And I think what he's saying is that we then remove the emotion of the audio by just editing a transcript. I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just the pauses and things like that are really important for you to understand what's going on, for you to understand what that person actually thinks. And there are quite a lot of services out there which will take all of those pauses out, and that seems to me to be a real mistake. So I think we need to be very careful, which is why again I'm not particularly impressed at the whole idea of video soundtracks being used as audio podcasts, because they are different. They really are.
Now, we've talked about how much of audio is going to video, but Ausha are doing it the reverse way around. What are they doing, James?
Yes, so this is the French podcast company Ausha. They have added a tool to turn YouTube videos into audio podcasts. So you might remember Blueberry's Vid to Pod service a couple of years ago. Ausha has jumped in and said, we'll do that too. So you can set it to automatically convert an entire YouTube playlist into a podcast. You can then say every new video that I upload, automatically turn it into a podcast. It's a really bright idea. I know that it did quite well for Blueberry once it first launched, so that was a good thing. So hopefully we will see more of that in the future.
Let's zip around the world, James. Over to your part of the world, the Australian Pod Ranker. It says it fails to measure video podcasts, according to Prithvi Day from Spotify. Why is it failing to measure it?
Yes, I thought this was such a mean thing to do, because Prithvi, who I know well, and she's a nice person, but she was quoted by Mumbrella, which has its problems with all forms of rankers and measurement and everything else. It's not put together by very clever journalists anyway, but they grabbed a clip of her basically saying that the Australian Podcast Ranker isn't fit for purpose. It doesn't measure video podcasts. It doesn't capture any video streams, and so therefore it's crap. And you know the reason why it doesn't capture any video streams? It's because Spotify themselves won't actually give them the data. And I've talked to somebody that works on the Australian Podcast Ranker, and they have said we would be delighted if Spotify wanted to give us the video streaming data, then we would be perfectly happy to include that in the Australian Podcast Ranker, but they don't, so we can't. And so for Prithvi Day to turn around and say it's really important to have a third-party measurement platform that provides greater transparency and clarity in the ecosystem, it's fine for her to turn around and say that, but if she's not supplying the data to the third-party measurement ecosystem in the first place, what's she moaning about? What's she crying up about? Don't really understand it. I think it's just a bit mean. Step up and fix it for yourself, if I were you. So naughty, naughty, naughty. That's one thing which has gone on. Back in the UK, did you hear Ted Sarandos on BBC Radio 4 earlier on in the week?
No, but I do listen to a lot of Radio 4, but no, missed that one.
Yes. So he ended up talking about all kinds of things. He talked about giving £1 million to the National Film and Television School. Hooray! Talked about various other things. But here's a little clip of him talking about YouTube and talking about podcasts.
Let's talk about the wider industry. Is YouTube now your main rival, more so than any other streaming service?
Well, look, we've identified YouTube as a competitor 10 years ago. If you go back and look at all of our earnings calls and our public announcements, we've always identified YouTube as a potential competitor. In the last several years, they've become much more meaningful. Here in the UK, as you know, they're growing faster than everybody else. About 55% of all YouTube watching is now on the television. It's not on your phone. It's not on your laptop. So it is clearly a television competitor. And remember, that's a zero-sum game. The time that you spend on a connected TV, if you're watching one app, you're not watching broadcast, you're not watching BBC, you're not watching ITV, and you're not watching any other streaming service, including Netflix. So when you look at that, you'd say, of course, this is the landscape, and they are today about close to 9% of television time in the UK. And what surprises me all the time is the studios and the networks around the world, including the BBC, actually, are just continue to feed them free programming, but of course they're growing so fast. And then people will make an argument whether or not it's television. It is literally television. Yeah. So in other words, I actually think there's a great opportunity. What this says is it's a recognition that consumers change their habits, the way how people watch, how young people watch, particularly because it'll influence the next several decades of television. But I think that there is probably a better distribution relationship than just turning over your content and making pennies on the dollar.
Talk about those new habits. Let's talk about podcasts. When I interviewed you in 2019, I asked why you weren't going to go into live sports, and you said, I love live sports. My question is just always, what's the best way to spend the next 10 billion? You've since then moved into live sports, and you've also moved into podcasts. So you've got Gary Lineker's The Rest is Football during the World Cup. But how do you see podcasts in the Netflix future?
So I actually think podcasts are just an extension of chat shows. It's the new generation of chat shows where you don't have to make one show that appeals to everybody. The way, I grew up with Johnny Carson, 45 million people used to watch the show every night. But we're now with podcasts where you do have a much more passionate, but often smaller, more specialized audience. And you can support hundreds or thousands of them. I think there's 1 million podcasts now, literally around the world.
Some better than others.
Yes, I agree.
But they come with a back catalogue which can be refreshed every single week, and they're pretty low to produce. Pretty low cost.
Yeah. And again, which lowers the expectation and the need for to make the audience bigger and broader all the time.
So do you think podcasts will be an increasingly big part of your future? Because Simon Cornwell, the exec producer behind The Night Manager, who we spoke to recently, said that the future of television is very expensive and very cheap. It's going to kind of bifurcate in that way. Yeah. Is that your sense?
I It's likely something like that, but obviously I think what it is just when people have a lot of choices, you could support a broad variety of genres and formats and ambitions, actually. And I think in the world of where YouTube is growing in engagement, they're not really investing much, in people. So the creators have to make their own choices, then have to put up their own money. And if it connects, there might be some money back in the form of revenue share of the advertising. But it ends at the end of the day, ends up being pennies on the dollar to the industry. So I think it's in total, it could be a much more diverse industry. But I also think that people flee to quality and look for kind of ambitious storytelling. But I think that more things can exist on television because of these new kind of direct-to-consumer models.
Well, let's hope for the BBC. Ted Sarandos of Netflix, thank you very much, Steve, for coming in to see us.
Thank you.
Ted Sarandos on BBC Radio 4 on the Today programme. You could, a couple of years ago, have listened to that on the BBC's international website. These days you can't. And so that's why I grabbed about a third of that interview there. I thought that was fascinating. Sam, I thought, him talking about podcasts being an extension of chat shows just so much misunderstanding of what podcasts are. Astonishing.
Well, I also thought his numbers were a little off. I mean, 1 million, not quite right. But again, he's correctly identifying YouTube as his attention time competitor,
and also turning around and saying YouTube doesn't pay creators, which is horseshit. They absolutely do, but they only pay the successful ones. I don't know. So I just found the whole thing was fascinating. Yes, he absolutely. The most conservative number for the amount of podcasts is about 3 million. That's the amount that's on Apple Podcasts, more on Spotify, more on in the podcast index. But yeah, I just thought he does sound as if he is someone that doesn't actually have much of a grasp of the business that he's in, which I just found fascinating.
Well, everyone I hear talk about him says he's a very, very smart man and does know his business very well. But maybe he just doesn't know podcasting very well. But I think it's interesting. They've gone down the exclusives, paying a lot out. I don't know why they're doing that. They've seen Spotify fail on that market. They talk about Gary Lineker. It seems like a temporary one for the World Cup. So will that just come and go? I think they've got into cheap TV, as you call it, and I think that's what they want to do to get more attention, eyeballs. But will it be a sustainable business model? Who knows? I think the other thing I find interesting is Spotify here. So we talked about Spotify video being available. I don't think I've, even on my desktop, mobile, I've really watched video on Spotify yet. But also, when I do watch my Fire TV and I've got BBC One, I've got Netflix and Prime, they're all front and centre of my TV experience. They're literally icons there ready. The Spotify icon isn't even on the front page. You have to go to other apps to find it. And I also think placement on the remote control will be a significant purchase. So on the remote control I've got a Netflix Prime, and there's no YouTube dedicated button. There's no Spotify dedicated button. I think those, again, if I had marketing money and with the deep pockets that both those companies had, I would start to go to manufacturers and say, place our button on your remote control. Yes,
and that's certainly how some of these very cheap boxes, there's a box you can buy in Walmart for about $30 or $40. It's basically, the money from YouTube and from Netflix for the buttons on the remote control is, half of the money that's paying for this hardware in the first place. So I think that there's some really interesting stuff there. But I suppose the question is Spotify synonymous with video? And actually, is Apple Podcasts synonymous with video? I mean, not right now, it's not. But surely Apple TV is the thing. And so I'm kind of there thinking, I'm a bit confused. What will the audience think? If they want to watch the Joe Rogan show, then they'll watch it on Apple Podcasts, presumably at some point in the future. But if they want to watch another TV show that, The Martian or something, then they'll watch it on Apple TV. I don't really understand where there's a bit of a complicated user journey there, in a way that we haven't hitherto had in terms of podcasting, but obviously we have had in terms of TV. So it's a peculiar one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we say the word Google to mean search. We say Hoover to mean vacuum cleaner. We probably say we're going to Spotify it in our minds for music, and I'd say YouTube for video. And I think you'll find it hard, as you just said, for people to jump to their first reaction to watch a video to be to another platform. Yeah,
no, indeed.
Here's an interesting one that you wrote about. Crooked Media podcasts will be shown on the US news channel MS Now. So are other TV companies now going, oh, look at what Netflix are doing, we better get a bit of that podcasting love over here?
Well, so I think that's what CNN have thought. Look what Netflix is doing. We will buy some podcasts and put them onto the CNN streaming platform. This is kind of a little bit different in that MS Now, which used to be MSNBC, that is now putting a compilation show of Crooked Media podcasts on the telly at 9 o'clock Eastern on Saturday night. Not really a very high peak time for a rolling news channel, particularly MS Now, but nevertheless, it's a thing. So perhaps they're seeing it as it's a cheap way to fill an hour or 2 hours. I don't actually know how long it is. So perhaps they're just purely seeing it as that. But I thought that was an interesting plan. Interestingly enough, it's all of Crooked Media's US shows will be in there, not Pod Save the UK, which is a co-production. They're not going to be putting any of that onto MS Now, but they will put lots of clips of those shows, of those other shows onto this particular show. It won't be exclusive in any way either, which is important to have a look at. But I just think it's a cheap piece of programming that will do both of them, some good. It'll give them some advertising to sell, and will be good for people to learn more about the shows that they stick out. So I think it's good on both sides.
Just a trivial question.
Now on the Pod News Weekly Review, Unreliable Trivia, with Sam Sethi.
Do you know what the MS stands for in MS Now?
More trivia. Excellent. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, MSNBC was Microsoft, wasn't it? It was MSN.
Yeah.
And NBC. And so, but what I find weird is Microsoft sold its stake in the TV channel in 2005, but it's still called MS Now.
I know. That's why I find it really weird.
That's just like, okay, that doesn't seem to make any sense. What's it got to do with Microsoft Now? Nothing.
Literally.
Well, no, actually, I tell you what it stands for now, according to Wikipedia, so it must be true. My source for news, opinion, and the world.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, it's not an acronym, it's a backronym. That's what.
Yes. Can I hear the barrel being scraped there?
Yes,
I can.
And that's Unreliable Trivia with Sam Sethi.
Moving on to people in jobs, James, what's been happening?
Audio UK has a new CEO. How do you pronounce his name, Sam? He's called Chris Baugen. Okay.
That's how I'm going with it.
Right, I'm running with that. Chris Bourne, I kind of vaguely think it might be, but I really don't know. And they didn't tell me. Anyway, a new CEO for Audio UK. Of course, we've had the previous CEO, Chloe Straw, on this show a number of times. So we should get Chris on and maybe he can tell us.
Already in the pipeline.
Oh, look at this. There you go. He joins, if you don't know, I think most recently Global, I want to say, but I could be wrong there. But he's also been at Wondery, Spotify and Deezer, so he knows a thing or two. So that'll be interesting to watch. Riverside has a new creative director, Ari Kuchar. Marshall Louis has been appointed head of Audible content in North America. That's not head of content which is Audible, that's head of content which is on Audible, in case you're confused. He used to work for Wondery and joined Audible after, of course, Wondery was all sort of broken up and absorbed by other bits of the Amazon world. Matthew Passy has joined Produce Your Podcast as Director of Strategic Growth. He joins from Libsyn, of course, and the Podcast Consultant. So congratulations to Matthew. And Lovisa Olsen used to be Head of Content at PodX. She was employee number 1. She's just left. She has new things on the horizon at some point in the future. But it's always interesting when you see employee number 1 leave. So PodX, of course, bigger and bigger and bigger. They're now in a big chunk of Lemonada Media alongside everything else.
Podcast events on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, it's time for some events and awards. And we'll start with some awards and then we'll talk about events. So firstly, the AMBIs were this week, of course. The American Podcast Awards. Actually, I should have checked, shouldn't I, how many were British. I can probably already tell you because I did type in the full list yesterday. I think it's all Americans again. So I don't think there's anybody from certainly outside of North America.
I just think they should just be honest and call them the AMBIs, the American Podcast Awards. I just don't think they should pretend.
I mean, having won an AMBI, I of course have nothing bad to say about them at all. I think that they're perfect. Yes, there's a full list of those on the website. It was postponed by 24 hours after the snowpocalypse in New York. So many congratulations to them for fixing that and making that work. That's a big, big, big deal, isn't it, to have to move an entire awards ceremony one more night. But many congratulations for that. Of course, Kara Swisher also given the Governor's Award in that too. And events. Only yesterday, Sam, we covered the exclusive news of the new podcast movement, which is happening in New York, of course, at the end of, in the middle of September. It's really exciting to see how well that they're actually planning things. So if you haven't yet seen the announcement, and Sam hasn't seen the announcement at all, because this is actually going out after we record. But yes, it's an entire week. Is Podcast Movement and Sounds Profitable? September the 14th to the 18th in Terminal 5 in New York City. It's in the Hell's Kitchen area of New York City. Terminal 5 is a big sort of venue that does music and stuff like that. It's going to be a really exciting venue to be at. So basically, the first 2 days is the Sounds Profitable Business Summit with lots of stuff for Sounds Profitable partners who get early access. If you're not a Sounds Profitable partner, then you will be able to purchase tickets later, but only one ticket per organisation to make it better for you to join Sounds Profitable is my understanding. Then on September the 16th, everybody takes a break because that is when the IAB Upfronts is happening. So everybody crosses town to watch the IAB and to watch people sell their wares over at the IAB. And then after some parties that evening, then there is Podcast Movement, which is September the 17th to the 18th. That's, I think, Thursday, Friday, if my memory serves me correctly. But that will be all of the creator stuff, all of the stuff which works fantastically for the Podcast Movement audience. So looking at all of the content and experience stuff, all of that. There'll be panels, there'll be showcases, obviously networking events, as Podcast Movement is very well known for. So I think it's going to be a really, I think that's a smart move on Brian Barletta's part. I think that's a really smart thing for him to do. So you can go to the entire week if you want to. The business stuff first, then a little break for IB Upfronts, and then the creator stuff. I think that's quite neat. So it should be interesting to see how all of that bit works.
Well, if I was going, it'd be interesting. I'd be going from Terminal 5 to Terminal 5. That would be quite fun. Yes, but I won't be going because I'll be turning the grand old age of 60 that week.
Wow. There you go. So
yes, I'll be turning the volume up.
Pardon?
That's what I'll be doing. What?
So that should be really good fun. I'm looking forward to seeing how Podcast Movement works. I'm looking forward to, obviously, the sounds profitable stuff at the beginning of the week is really interesting. It's interesting that you've got a split of business and then creator, but I actually think that it probably works because you can go to both anyway.
No, I think it's good use of time if you're doing that as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that means smaller venue, but actually it means that you get more energy from that sort of venue as well. So I think all of that is very good news. So sponsorship opportunities, tickets, and all of that stuff going on sale soon. Now, I was talking to Brian earlier on in the week. He said that he was going to be announcing ticket prices and stuff like that in this announcement, but actually he's decided not to. They're really trying to keep the cost of the tickets, particularly for Podcast Movement, down as much as they possibly can. They appreciate that New York is an expensive place to be, but it's also a cheap place to be. It just depends where you want to stay. And how you want to get into the city. But they're really trying to work hard. And I think this is a nice venue change. It's not in a hotel with swirly carpets. It's in a proper venue, which is going to be decent. And I think that then allows you to do a lot of different things. When you're stuck in a hotel, next to the airport somewhere, you really can't do very much. So I think it's going to be a really nice experience. So I'll have to get a new Esther, but maybe I will do that and go along and take part.
The tech stuff on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, it's the stuff you'll find every Monday in the Pod News newsletter. Here's where Sam talks technology. What have you got, Sam?
You said last week about a new proposal for a MetaBoost tag and an API standard from Alex Gates, and I said something along the lines of, I've got higher priorities at the moment with video podcast hosting and live podcast hosting, so when the micropayment stuff settles down and we've got some consensus, then I'll probably put some dev time towards it. So I put that out on, I think, Mastodon, and along with a chart that showed that the share price of Bitcoin had halved in the last 6 months. Oh my God, did I get absolute vitriol from the Bitcoin bros. You don't know what you're talking about. It's rubbish. Bitcoin's brilliant. Why would you go to stablecoin? I'll never recommend True Fans. I had Jupiter Networks. You're rubbish. You're totally rubbish. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, just come up with a non-moving quicksand standard that we can all work around. And then, yes, I'll get on it, but I'm not going to waste my time. If you want to stay a Fountain fanboy, Chris, stay there. I don't need you, so fine. But really, it's myopic. It's so myopic sometimes. They can't look outside the box.
Yes, I mean, I think that there's two things there. I think showing the chart of Bitcoin's value, whatever it is that you said, halving in the last 6 months. I mean, I think that is a different conversation. And, we're not in this to invest in Bitcoin. We're in this to use Bitcoin because it's a cheap method of getting money from one place to another. And there's nothing to stop you from instantly translating or transferring your Bitcoin back into real money, into pound sterling or whatever it is that you want to end up doing. So I think that there's two things. I think you were knocking Bitcoin as well as knocking the whole micropayment standard thing. And I totally agree with you in the whole micropayment standard thing. If it keeps on changing every 2 weeks, then nobody's going to develop anything for it. I think that there's a different conversation around Bitcoin's shit, isn't it?
I conflated two things. Yes. Okay, fair enough.
Yes, but there we go. But it is a bit of a frustration, though, certainly.
So Adobe, very interesting company. I don't really look at it that often. I find things like Photoshop too complex for my little brain. But Jay LeBeouf, who used to be at Descript, is over there now.
Yes, Jay LeBeouf, by the way. Jay LeBeouf. Yes.
It's French, le boeuf, surely. No, okay.
Sadly, le boeuf.
My French teacher.
That's how he pronounces it, is it?
Yes,
but yes, so he is their head of AI.
Yeah.
And he's coming on to this show, isn't he, next week with a big announcement?
Is.
What's he coming on for?
Well, I can't tell you the big announcement because he's going to send you a press release. I can't tell you that part. But they have been working on their video editor. So they've got 3 products. They've got Adobe Podcast, they've got Premium Pro, and they've got Adobe Firefly. And so what Jay does do is he comes on the show, and I've already done the interview, so it's great. He's going to define what each of those products is there for, how they integrate well together. They've already got a video editor in the Adobe Firefly, and it then does some very clever stuff to create footage and B-rolls for you. It's a feature called Quick Cut. That's not the big announcement. So next week we will have Jay on the show. They've also got, like Spotify, prompt-based editing capabilities as well. So the AI can help you edit videos and stuff. But
please, could you make this show sound good?
No, that's beyond AI. Come on.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Jay LaBeouf next week on the Pod News Weekly Review. And a couple of other interesting things, or at least I thought that they were interesting. Podlytic, which is a new analytics platform. It's pulling analytics together for your podcast, particularly if you switch from one host to another. So worth a peek. And David Maguire, who used to work at Adalicious, now has been working for himself for a bit, making a new thing called Fan Swoon. And I looked at this and I thought, Fan Swoon, that's surprisingly close to True Fans. But it's a creator intelligence tool.
I think OnlyFans is close to True Fans. I can't quite see.
Well, yes. I mean, to be fair, yes. So it's a creator intelligence tool.
The content is nothing the same.
No. Well, I should hope not. Although you do have video.
Yes.
So Fan Swoon, back to Fan Swoon.
Yes.
Focus. The latest version of Fan Swoon. It's basically for you if you create podcasts, but also videos and songs and newsletters and everything else. It will pull all of the data in from the various platforms, track that data. It's got some AI in there, so the AI will look at that data and tell you things that it thinks that you might find interesting. There's all kinds of stuff in there. You can follow 2 things for free if you want to on the Fan Swoon website. So it might be worth giving that a play. Where is the Fan Swoon website? It's at fanswoon.com. That's FANSWOON.
Boostergram. Super comments. Zaps. Fan mail. Super chats. And email. Our favorite time of the week. It's the Pod News Weekly Review inbox.
Yeah, so many different ways to get in touch with us. Fan mail by using the link in our show notes, or boosts, or email, and we share any money that we make as well. I should thank the excellent Brian Ensminger, who is yet again our top streamer in terms of streaming sats. So thank you, Brian. Oscar Merry from Fountain sent 9,999 sats, which gets him this jingle. Yes, congratulations, Oscar. Thank you. He says, great coverage of the Apple Podcasts video integration. Excellent interview with Justin. Let's get Apple adopting alternate enclosure. I have a feeling that things may freeze over before that might happen.
Don't use that phrase. I'm in trouble for that phrase. Don't use that phrase.
But I've got no idea why. But
you'll find out in a minute.
Oh, okay. But Oscar, thank you. And also thank you to the ugly quacking duck who sent 2,222 sats using Podcast Guru. He says, it looks like more control and censorship heading down the pike for the podcaster. I think he's probably saying that about Apple Podcasts. Not sure I'd agree. But Bruce, thank you and much appreciated. There are super comments on True Fans, which I can see now because you fixed that bug. But also, yes. so can you. What have we got in there then?
Well, Seth Goldstein sent a couple. One was, I'm glad Apple is doing this, even if HLS is still catching on. I'm excited to see where this goes. And that was great. And he said, I'm excited for all these developments in HLS. HLS will be epic.
Will be epic.
Martin Lindeskog, he said, I'm interested to test video podcasting. The question is how it could add value to the listener viewer with busy eyes. Do you think that podcasting service will add video editing features in the near future? I'll have to check if Alitu and Boomcast could provide me with the same editing tools. I'm not sure that I will have the energy and time for editing plenty of frames. Yeah. So the answer really is yes, I will expect to see more video hosting coming to the traditional hosts. You know, we've seen it with companies like Flightcast and obviously Fountain announced theirs. But I do think more of them will. So let's see, given what's happening with the adoption of video. He then also said, I have to send a third boostergram by the dip.
Yes.
Not sure.
See, he's talking with you about the price of Bitcoin. Again,
the thing with Bitcoin, I think, is people are beginning to treat it as a value of store, not as a value of transaction. And that is my problem. I think people are, because it's not pegged to anything, I think people are beginning to see it as a speculative way, like they do with gold or silver. That's where...
but the US dollar isn't pegged to anything.
No, but it is. Well, you've got US Treasury bonds.
It's pegged to the US dollar.
Well, it is, and it's the world currency, and also you've got US Treasury bonds and the Fed behind it. So there is an element of security and stability. I mean,
so the UK pound, the pound sterling.
Yeah, but it's no longer the world currency anymore, and it hasn't got a gold backing to it. The two biggest currencies, by the way, that have strongest gold backing are the Chinese yen and the ruble in Russia. They hold the biggest gold currency.
Well, yeah.
I mean, look.
You see, I mean, I think so. So I get paid in American dollars. But obviously I live my life in Australian dollars. And so the differences are quite a lot. And when the American dollar is worth less, then that means that, that I get less money in my, in my pay packet. So to speak, or maybe the other way around. But you know what I mean.
Yes.
So I don't get a standard amount every single month, which is weird. And that's exactly the same with this, I suppose. But yes, I can certainly see that, and I can certainly also see from Martin's point of view, it ruins all of the numberology. Because rows of ducks, 2,222 sats. Well, how do you end up doing that with, if I'm getting paid in Australian dollars and you're getting paid in pound sterling, none of that bit works anymore. So I can kind of see all of that stuff as well. I think at the end of the day, we need to think of Bitcoin when it comes to paying podcasts. I think we need to think of it as just the mechanism of how the money gets there, and to turn it automatically and instantly back into pound sterling or back into whatever it is that you want to, the Polish zloty. Then they use the euro now, I think. But you know what I mean. I think that all of that works well.
Yeah. The story we just zipped over, I'm just going to mention it now. Stripe are considering the purchase of PayPal, which I think is significant.
Oh, good Lord.
Well, I only mention it for one reason, that we talked about YouTube paying creators in stablecoin via PayPal. And I think given Stripe's strong investment into stablecoin and PayPal's investment in stablecoin, I could see that being a really interesting acquisition if they go ahead. Stripe is a private company, so it would be a paper deal, I'm guessing. I think that would be really interesting. And then I do think, I've said in the prediction show, I think stablecoin would be the way forward for micropayments.
That would be fascinating. And I think, PayPal is an interesting company that has enshittified itself quite a lot. And Stripe, for all of Stripe's, good and bad, Stripe seems to do a pretty good job. And they don't appear to have messed themselves up certainly in the last 10 years or so since I've become a customer of theirs. So hopefully that means good news for PayPal. So that would be fascinating to keep an eye on. Martin also says that these micro donations could be recognised by cool tools such as Runway, Helipad, etc. I like how Runway's first in that. So thank you, Martin. Yes, I mean, the more that we can get, I think that would be fantastic. Runway at the moment only works with a Strike account, but there's no reason why it couldn't work with all kinds of other accounts in there as well, as long as there's an open API. So worthwhile keeping an eye on. And Neil Velio, 2 messages from him, including, again, another 9,900 sats. So, Neil, you get one of these. Yes, he says, excellently explained. Well worth the 4-day wait between announcements to listen. Thanks as always for the deep dive, guys. Fabulous journalism as always, James. Steady on.
Nothing to do with me.
and also he mentions. We were talking about ad conversions and stuff, and Neil quite rightly points out that lots of ad agencies don't seem to understand conversions in podcasting. They go by impressions anyway. I would go even further, and I would say lots of ad agencies don't understand how advertising works, Neil. I have been astonished by some of the ad agencies that I've had to deal with over the last 7 years. Mostly, the advertisers in the Pod News website are direct, but some of them go through ad agencies, and it is always such a lot of pain and hassle because really they don't understand what they're doing. I'm always astonished at it. So, yes, totally hear what you're saying there, Neil. Thank you so much for those. Thank you also to our 23 power supporters, including the excellent John Spurlock, and also a bunch of others. Who can I remember from the top of my head? Ms. Eileen Smith, I can remember her off the top of my head.
Yes, okay, I will put the list in next week.
And Seth, of course. But no, thank you all so much for that. We really appreciate it. It helps us sort out things like drinks at events and stuff like that. So please, if you would like to join and be part of the 23 supporters, then weekly.podnews.net. So, what's happened for you, Sam, in our last few minutes? Because you've got a meeting to go to.
Buzzcast. I thought I'd listen to see what they said about Apple Podcasts and their support for video. Wow, opens up one. Sam Sethi says, hell will freeze over if we support video. I'm like, yeah, I probably did say something like that. My view was that a couple of years ago when I was prompting to see if Buzzsprout would support the alternative enclosure and any form of video and that whole discussion, they may not have said hell freezes over, but they were certainly very strong in their rebuff of the support for video, and they were talking about it's too costly in this, and which was the embryo for the conversation in the podcast standards group for, well, why would we not look at something like HLS then instead of MP4? So instead of downloading the whole MP4, maybe we could stream or have a smaller bandwidth version using HLS. And that was where that conversation started. So yes, it was a conversation I was having with Buzzsprout. Hell freezes over, probably too strong, but I do wonder whether Buzzsprout will support. The Buzzcast show seemed to suggest that they're still not going to support video. That video is still, maybe not what their audience is going to want to do.
I think that they are saying they will support video when it makes business sense for them to do. At the moment, they can't quite work out the business sense. But at the moment, frankly, they've not had, hundreds of people asking, can we do video? Because you don't need Buzzsprout in order to upload video onto Spotify. In fact, Buzzsprout won't be able to help you with that anyway. And you don't need Buzzsprout to upload video onto YouTube. So actually, nobody is asking Buzzsprout for video right now. When we see Apple Podcasts release, probably at the end of March, beginning of April, then I would guess that there'll be a bunch of people saying, well, I want to do video on the Buzzsprout platform now. How are you going to help us do that? And I think that'll be worthwhile, keeping an eye out for. But so.
Well, Henry Ford.
Unreliable Trivia. with Sam Sethi.
Well, Henry Ford, when he said if he asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, not a car. And I sometimes think we've talked in the past about you have to support certain tags first before the adoption, because users don't know what they don't know. And so the alternative enclosure, for example, will be interesting to see if Buzzsprout supports that. You know, and if they do, then that opens the door maybe to the next stage of them adding video into that before Apple adopts, you know, HLS in the primary enclosure. So I don't know. I mean, what I'm saying is, yeah, maybe I was too strong in hell freezes over, but I'm also still a believer. I said it earlier. I don't think many of the traditional hosts have given users the option of video, and so they've all been drifted towards YouTube as the only place to do it, really.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens there in terms of that. You did say, you know, you've been interrupting this podcast all the way through, Sam, with Trivia Corner. Trivia Corner. When did Henry Ford say whether people really wanted a faster horse instead of a motor car?
No idea. Go on.
Never.
Ever. He never said it, did he?
He never said it. The Henry Ford Museum doesn't include the saying on its list of more than 200 verified quotes.
Right.
It doesn't appear in the in their archive. It doesn't appear in his autobiography either. Wow. And in fact, the first time that it was ever quoted as fact was 1999. So,
okay, I still think it's a great quote. I'm sticking to it. I'm ignoring that fact.
Yes.
Fake news, as they say.
And that's Unreliable Trivia with Sam Sethi.
Have you been listening to any exciting podcasts recently?
Yeah, I think there's a couple worth listening to. Matt Deegan, friend of the show, his podcast, The Media Club, had a good review of Apple Podcasts. They had a guest on there from the Daily Mail group, Jamie East.
Yeah, Jamie East, who we've had on this show before. Yeah. Matt won't hear us talking about his podcast because, as he said to me many times, your podcast, it's too long. So he certainly won't be listening to this.
The other Matt does listen, I do know, because I had a drink with him and he was telling me how he loves the show. So there you go.
Oh, well, there you go. The other Matt. The Matt and Matt who used to put together the British Podcast Awards before they got all corporate and sold it. And why not? And you've been listening to another show.
Well, I haven't quite listened to it yet. I've just noted it. The 411 show, Podcast 411, which is Rob Walsh's, has a new episode out. And of course, it's Mark Asquith, the co-founder.
He's talking to his boss now, is he?
Yes, he is. Yes. First show back, get the boss on. They talk about their love of superheroes, AI slop, and of course the origin of Captivate. So Rob, as we've mentioned, is now part of the Captivate family along with Elsie Escobar. So yes, worth a listen, I think.
And of course, Mark Asquith is the newest British addition to the Podcast Hall of Fame.
Technically the only British, because you're not British anymore.
I am British.
You can't be British. You're an Australian, aren't you?
I'm British as well. I'm British as well. Yes. I actually stood there and I said, I am the first British person to get into the Podcast Hall of Fame for at least the next five minutes until Mark gets in. So yes.
And lastly, we had a lovely conversation on the WhatsApp private group that we have. And it was all about Justin asking whether there was a option to highlight a episode of your podcast so that, people coming to your podcast page could say, oh, let's listen to that one first, rather than the trailer only. And I sent him some screenshots and said, yes, we copied this time the Spotify feature, because Spotify has had this tagged feature for a while. And I proposed it in October 2023 and it's been totally ignored by everybody. But it is there in the GitHub and it is coded by true fans. And so, yes, you can sort by most popular, you can sort by. So again, it did bring up a discussion I had with Russell from Pod 2 is, who makes the final decision on which tag gets approved? And it feels like it still goes back to Dave and Adam, who I love dearly, both of them, but nothing seems to be getting approved anymore. And it just feels...
I think now, it basically, if enough people think that it's a good idea and enough people start coding it in, then that's how it gets approved.
Right.
Anyone can put a a thing in there. Anybody can put a new tag in there, a new feature in there. I think it's just really up to, let's make sure that it's in a number of different apps, a number of different hosting companies, and I think that's probably the right way of doing it, rather than trying to convince Dave and Adam, who are working on other stuff as well. Yeah. So, that's my humble opinion.
Well, it's in the GitHub. If anyone wants to implement it, congratulations. We have already.
Yes. And I should say, David Marsall has been doing an excellent job over the last couple of weeks of tidying up the Podcasting 2.0 GitHub. He's done a fantastic job. For some reason, I get a message every time any issue in the GitHub is commented on or closed or whatever. And there have been some days when I've woken up to my email full of David Marsall. So he's done a really good job of doing that. That will hopefully mean that the GitHub is rather a more useful thing.
Yes.
So that's certainly a good thing. I was remiss in when we were talking about Buzzsprout video hosting, I was remiss in turning around and saying, well, when are you going to host video then?
Yes. Well, are you asking now? Yes.
Yes. When are you going to host video then?
Next week. You will get the press release. It's only official until you get the press release. Until then, it can be anything you like. But yes, we'll you will have a press release next week for video hosting. Very nice. We are going to do MP4 streaming, so it's not a download.
Okay.
Well, in your world, it's a download. It's 6 seconds downloads, but yes, it's technically a stream. So yes. And now I'm going to knock you on there. So last week we talked about the global player, and you said to me, "Yes, Pod News Daily's in there," and I went, "Oh, excellent!" And you're going to get Pod News Weekly.
I was factually correct.
Yes,
I was factually correct. Yes,
you were. But you said, and I can play it back to you if you want. I will get Pod News Weekly review in there as well. And I went and did a quick search. It's not there yet.
Yes. No, I haven't
tapped up your connection. Anyway,
yes.
So what's happened for you, James?
I bought a new pair of headphones. I've been using the Rode headphones for a long, long time, which I know that you use as well. Yeah. They're heavy, they're unpleasant, they don't sound very good. Don't like them.
There's a sponsorship gone then. Damn.
Well, I mean, that wasn't a sponsorship that was going to happen anyway. So I have turned into American public radio, because everybody in American public radio, and therefore everybody that makes podcasts in America, uses the Sony MDR 7506s. They're the only one in Sony's range, in Sony's MDR7 range, which Sony still make, because literally they are the only headphones that anybody buys in the US, as far as I can work out, who works in radio. And you get used to how they sound, and you get used to how they feel and everything else. And so that has been a good purchase. So hurrah for Sony for still making these things. They first came out about 20 years ago, apparently. So that's a good thing. I've enjoyed that. And I'm very near to launching a brand new website, Sam.
Gosh.
Because obviously I do enough websites, but I'm very close to launching a brand new one. Except it's not a brand new one really, but I am the new curator of it. Do you remember that Blueberry actually owned its own news website for podcasts, and it was called podcasternews.com. And it was really interesting, actually. You can go all the way back on Podcaster News to 2014, which is a significant time ago. And you can see that there are stories in there about Spotify launching podcasts. And you can see that there are, stories in there about, about different companies buying different things, and obviously, Spotify buying Megaphone and all of that kind of stuff. So it's some really nice archive material from a very different world in terms of podcasting to what we've got now. So when I was at Podfest, I sat down with Barry Krantz, who's Blueberry's acting CEO, and I said, I want to make sure that podcastnews.com doesn't go away. And I think that it would be really nice if we can archive that and make that into a website that sits there, that is very clear that it's an archive website that sits there, that pushes people towards Blueberry if they want hosting, pushes people towards Pod News if they want brand new news, but is a big list of all of the news that is in that particular site. And very nicely, he has said yes. So that's what I've been doing all week, is I've been trying to pull all of the WordPress stuff into Hugo, which is what I'm going to use to make it static and simple and straightforward, and then I can upload it and forget about it. But that should be really cool. So I'm licensing that for a while from the good folks at Blueberry, and that should be a lovely thing, I think. And so, I'm thrilled that the team over there, Dave Jackson wrote for it, Mike Dell wrote for it, loads of people. There's a brilliant article from Todd, actually, only a couple of years ago. Basically, this long, angry article about why you shouldn't trust Spotify, and he goes into all kinds of rants and raves about Spotify and how dreadful they are and blah blah blah. And it's classic Todd. It's a good thing.
Excellent.
So,
I'll go and read that.
So I'm looking forward to getting that live and up probably in the next week or so. By which time I'll be able to actually talk about it a little bit more. But still, there we are.
Good.
And that's it for this podcast. You can, of course, find more information about all of the podcast stories in the Pod News Daily newsletter at podnews.net.
You can support this show by streaming sites. Just don't leave Brian on his own. Anyone else can join in. You can give us feedback using the Buzzsprout fan mail link in our show notes, and you can send us a boost or a super comment, or become even better, a power supporter like the 23 power supporters at weekly.podnews.net.
Yes, our music is from TM Studios. Our voiceover is Sheila D. Our audio is recorded using Clean Feed. We edit with Hindenburg. And we're hosted and sponsored by Buzzsprout. Start podcasting. Keep podcasting.
Get updated every day. Subscribe to our newsletter at podnews.net. Tell your friends and grow the show.
And support us.
The Pod News Weekly Review will return next week. Keep listening.